comrades, and we're here for the Chief Guard of the Republic Radio Shoutout Show, Veteran Radio Shoutout Show, with your co-hosts Mike Tooman and Paul Burvitt every Saturday, noon until 1. And while the Sox are playing, we're noon till 2. So you could hear us on 1410 a.m. Of course, if you're listening to us now, you already know because you're either on 1410 a.m. or you're on WRMN1410.com and you're streaming live, or you're on WRMN 1410's YouTube live channel. You can hit us up in the studio number 847-931-1410 or the 505, that one, that's the old one. So 505-926-1410 is the text number. So live voice is 847-931-1410, text 505-926-1410. So, Paul, let's give a shout out to our sometimes co-host Marla, who she got a very prestigious award, didn't she?
She did. It was 2 days ago, and she got the Starfisher Award from Governor State University. It was a wonderful occasion, and actually after that I took her out to dinner, and she was the only person in the school to get it that we know of, and it relates to student retention. So we're very pleased that Marla's not only that, she's very good at what she does, and she constantly achieves great points and goals, but she's an award-winning educator, and we wanted to give her a little shout out. So we wanted to congratulate her on that.
Yes. Well, hopefully we'll have Marla on soon again.
We will. She's looking forward to it. She mentioned that at the event, so she'd like to come on.
All right. And so next week we'll have Marla on.
That'd be good.
We'll have to figure out a good topic.
Sounds good.
Something that Marla's an expert on.
Okay.
She could educate us. The other shout out I want to do to one of our, two of our loyal listeners, Carol and Gary. They're friends of they're the stepfather and mother of one of my Army buddies. And Gary is not only a loyal listener, but he's read nearly all of my books except for the latest one, which is Alabama Triad. But I told him about it, and he's going to go check out Amazon. I'm sure he's going to read that, and he enjoys them. He enjoys the books. So, people do read my books, which is great.
Your books are excellent.
Yeah. And he has and you can find all my books if you Google my name, Michael F. Tooman or Michael Francis Tooman on Amazon. You'll find them there. But if you want an easier way to find them, because I'm not a million seller yet. But if you go to Psylink.net, PSYLINK.net, that's my personal webpage that I maintain. And, this is our Chief Guard of the Republic, CGR.Psylink.net, that Matt just put up, but the simple Psylink.net, if you get rid of the CGR in front of it. Or you go into links. Go to links.
Oh, okay.
Go to links.
There we go.
And there we go. Now, scroll down and click down on the flying monkey there. And that's what'll come up. And if you go to the novels, click on there. Yeah, the tab. Yeah, so you click on the novels tab on Psylink.net, and my novels come up. And you click on any one of those, and it takes you right to the a short description of them. Then click on the cover again, the cover art. And that takes you to Amazon's page, right where you can purchase it. And I try to keep them cheap, Some of these guys, they write a book, and they charge $20, $25, make a profit, put all the effort into it. I don't blame them or anything. But I generally make less than 30 cents or less on my royalties per book. Because I just want people to read them. I guess I'm well enough off. I really don't need the money. The money would be nice. I can invest it, leave it to my kids, generational wealth. But I just want people to read, and it's a very good form of therapy. You get out there, you can do all your rants, and then you can publish it to the world for free on Amazon. Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing is very nice with that. I'm not going to talk about the owners of Amazon or their business practices or anything, but Kindle's been very good to me. I like Kindle, and it helped me a lot. And one of these days, if we need to do a pre-recorded show, I'm going to pre-record my how I went about publishing the book on Amazon. So Gary is a woodworker. He went right into woodworking, after his retirement. And that's a good form of therapy too. That's one of the things my dad did. He bought a couple scroll saws. He would do woodworking. He would do a lot of dioramas, and then he did mosaics, where he would use the wood and other things he put together. But Gary does fancy wooden storage boxes. So little boxes, for like jewelry boxes, or to throw your keys into, or to throw other things. And some of them I saw, you go to his Etsy page, which is www.box, the letter N, MOR, no E at the end, MOR, .etsy, ETSY.com. So that's boxnmore, BOXNMOR.etsy.com. And there it is. Matt pulled it up. And he's got some really cool stuff in there, because he does the woodworking, and he's got the nice Etsy page, show off your stuff, make a little money.
Nice.
And he uses mostly recovered wood. My dad used to know where all the furniture shops were, and he would go and he would find a lot of wood there, the nice wood and other stuff. And Gary says that he'll find old furniture that people are throwing out, and some of that stuff is really, like barnwood. It's well weathered, but it's good wood. Maple and stuff, not just the IKEA stuff we get with the press board. So that's a little shout out to them. Now, one more shout out coming here. One of my buddies, George Gandera. He's a VFW guy. And he hit me up with a text this morning about the Potawatomi Trails Powwow up in Shiloh Park in Zion, Illinois. 2400 Dowie Memorial Road. 2400 Dowie Memorial Road in Zion, Illinois. That's just the Shiloh Park. So they have the big Potawatomi Powwow. And they're going all day. They went yesterday. They're going today and Sunday. So tomorrow it's also going to be there. Now he's a big, he's a former Marine, and he's big with the VFW, and he's a real good guy. All right, real good guy on this stuff. And he also runs. He's in the. I think which VFW he's in. But he runs like a talking group for veterans to talk things out. Now, he's not a VSO, veteran service officer or anything, but he's there to talk to. So, before I close out the show, I'll get you his VFW post. And any VFW post or any veterans organization, like I was saying before, I'm with the American Legion. I'm also with the VFW, although I'm just a part-timer with the VFW. I mean, I pay my dues. Right? I'm with the Polish American League of Veterans. PAVL, Polish American Veteran League. I'm with them. And then I also with the Chapter 37 of Special Forces Association. And I'm a little more active with them. And the VACCC, the Veterans Administration of Cook County. So there go my, and let's not forget my favorite one, the one that I go to every week, is the Dunkin' Donuts Veterans, and we meet at the Bunker Hill Woods in Niles off Caldwell Avenue, and every Tuesday at 9 a.m. You show up a little early, you can talk with all the other veterans, maybe you meet a guy you knew from service. And they put out a lot of good information. It's great to go there. So now, Paul.
Yeah.
We were going to talk about the what do you call it? Projection of force for law enforcement. So in the news I saw, because we on the show here, we try to take some current events and some current news, and maybe a lot of people didn't hear about it because they, I think that the press was trying to make it look like we're going to war. Oh, we're going to war again. We sent 3 guided missile destroyers down off the Venezuela coast.
The Gravely, the Jason Dunham, and the Samson.
Yeah. And because Venezuela, right, we put out a warrant for Maduro, right? Or not?
He was indicted in the United States in 2020 under the I believe it was even the first Trump administration or whatever.
Yeah. And so he's the leader of a sovereign country, Venezuela.
Which is kind of a narco-terrorist supporting country.
Yes. Former President Bush would have said that they were at the, if he was president at the time, they would have been included in the axis of evil. Remember that speech?
I do.
Yeah, that was a great speech, and all of a sudden, Libya just like, oh, we're not doing that anymore, and the IRA was like, maybe peace is better, and then we went and stomped on Iraq, so people saw that happen. But we're sending warships down there.
To date. We've sent approximately 4,000 naval and marine troops. There's also, I believe, at least one amphibious vessel, and there's an attack submarine going down there for protection of the group. And there's 4,000 that we're sending down there on ships and ready Marines. But Maduro's countered as of this morning with a threat to us that he has 4.5 million militia in ready and waiting.
Yeah, and, he could keep them ready and waiting.
Yeah, let's not forget 2 things too. And we kind of talked about this last week from what happened on Friday. There's also a little bit more at play in this. There's a push now by Putin to house some hypersonic missiles there.
Nice.
Not that it would matter too much, but there's a push that he's going to try to bolster this guy. And as we talked about, they like to create trouble for us, both the Soviet Union and the Chinese, because they want to keep us, always involved in something to take some pressure off of them. But it occurred to me something, and I researched it before we got on the air. This is we're coming up, and that's another point I'd like to make. I'd like to call out the legacy media for not doing what they did 50 years ago. Because from 1973 to 1976, every day there was the bicentennial minute. And people learned a lot about the country from these things. We're not doing that for the 250th anniversary. But I went back, and 202 years ago, there was the Monroe Doctrine.
Yes, I love the Monroe Doctrine.
And there's something unique about the Monroe Doctrine, okay? And it ties in exactly with the country we're talking about. Venezuela was a deadbeat, okay? Maybe they're still a deadbeat. When you got trouble in the hood, it always usually comes from the same house, okay? And they were welching on their commitments to Europe at the time, okay? And Monroe was concerned that he didn't want, Napoleon and other type of people to be coming here and, creating a problem in our hemisphere. So he said, hey, as to what's going on here, we're going to be the people that are going to be involved, primarily because we didn't want these foreign aggressors to take a hold, which turned out to happen like about 100 years later. Okay. So we passed the Monroe Doctrine. Well, again, about 121 years ago, we had a president called Roosevelt, and he invented the corollary, or the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. And what he said is, if there's any trouble here, we're going to take care of it. Now, didn't matter if it's political, didn't matter if it's military, or they had the opium problem in the Far East. It doesn't matter if it's narco terrorism. Okay, we're going to step in. So there's nothing new about this. Anybody that thinks this is wrong probably flunked history, and they should have gone back to school. Okay, because this is something that's been in effect now for 120 and even longer, 202 years ago. So anybody that thinks that there's something improper about what we're doing needs to step back and maybe find another cause to be worried about.
Okay, so one of the things in international law, international maritime law, is that any country that suspects any ship out there of human trafficking, they could go and board that. They'll go and board that ship to prevent human trafficking, to free, like slavery. That is the main thing. And the other thing was piracy. All right, so they could fight pirates. All right, those are two things in maritime law. What they don't really mention is narco trafficking at the time. Because the opium trade was big with the British back in the day. They loved their opium. They're passing it around to everybody. And one of the first major seizures was in San Francisco of opium coming into this country. Now, there are weapons of war, all right? Guns, explosives, bombs that could be smuggled in, all right? And one of the big fears, and that Tom Clancy had written about it, biological agents or chemical agents coming into the country. But the weapon that Venezuela has been using against the United States to weaken the United States, because they don't like us, we don't like their government, we don't like their leadership, all right? We don't like their authoritarian dictatorship under the guise of socialism and communism, right? So they are sending in their criminals and their mentally disturbed people. So CNC, criminals and crazies, all right? So they're sending the criminals and crazies into the United States via the big, what do they call the caravans. So you empty your prisons, you empty your crazy hospitals, you put these people all in the caravan, and you surround them by people that are just looking for a better way of life, because you destroyed your way of life in Venezuela. So people are fleeing anyways.
You're typical real displaced persons.
Yeah, and they are a human shields and cover for these guys to get across the border. Once they're across the border, the crazies become our problem. The crime becomes our problem. All right. And we have to spend capital and blood, U.S. blood, to fight that on our own soil. Right. Which is why we're stopping them before they get in. The other weapon that they use against us is narcotics. The main one being cocaine coming in from there. Not so much. It used to be huge things of pot coming in, right? Marijuana coming in from Mexico and everything. Now, not so much. Yeah, everyone grows it. It's grown everywhere. It's almost legal everywhere, but not federally, right? So there's no point in smuggling into the United States. There's no cash in it anymore, all right? But the cocaine, we don't grow the coca plant in the United States. We don't process the raw coca leaves into cocaine and then pack it up in highly concentrated form and bring it across the border, which sometimes causes people to overdose or causes people to become addicted. And they're paying money to criminal organizations. And those criminal organizations are shipping that money back to Venezuela, to the cartels down there in Mexico, which are influencing the politics in those countries through money, but also through force. So our own people being addicted to the substance are giving their money to these criminals and propping up that country. So it's in their best interest, even though they'll deny it because, oh, then you look bad to the world, right? Oh, they're narco traffickers, right? They're like, no, but tolerate it. So you send the Navy down there to spot the boats coming out and trying to smuggle it in. And the nice thing about these guided missile destroyers, and right, we talk about a destroyer like in World War I and World War II. Other than frigates, destroyers were like the smallest battleship. Destroyers, escorts, but they were the smallest ship of the line. You would talk about destroyers, cruisers, and battleships, and aircraft carriers. And no one really talked about the frigates or the destroyer escorts or the minesweepers, which were still ships of war, but they weren't capital ships, so to speak. But we send these capital ships down there. They have really, really good radar. Really good radar. And they have really good sonar because now they're using submarines, right? So they could use they're like floating islands to spot the stuff. And then when they spot it, they can interdict it through the Coast Guard because they don't have the law enforcement authority, but the Coast Guard does. And the boats and the ships, depends on who they're flagged out of. So it's a projection of our force, using our force to move the Coast Guard, to support the Coast Guard right out there, which is law enforcement. They're not Department of Defense. They are Homeland Security. And what are they doing? They're defending our country from the narcotics coming in, much like ICE is and the Border Patrol is on our southern border. All right, so it's a defense of the country because they're trying to poison us. They're not going to call it chemical warfare. They're not going to call it biological warfare, but it's actually both. And we need to stop it. And we're not going to bomb Venezuela. We're not going to mine their ports, but we're going to be there. All right, so when we come back, we're going to talk more about the projection of force for law enforcement to defend the nation. If you want to call in to 847-931-1410. And look at the destruction it does without a warhead. All right, so they don't even need to put explosives on them, and it'll do mass destruction. But even then, if they filled it up with explosives, it probably wouldn't do more destructions because it's moving so fast. When a meteor hits the Earth and makes that huge foxhole, right? Huge foxhole out there in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't have any explosives in it. It's just kinetic energy. It's weight and speed, and it causes everything there. So that's where they jumped ahead of us in technology. They also jumped ahead of us in electronic warfare technology. Because during Afghanistan and Iraq, when you're dealing with people on the level of Fred Flintstone and Barty Rubble in their warfare type, electronic warfare didn't really work out too well. But human did. Right, so that's where we need to keep it up, right? And we can't, and sometimes you cannot rely on the consumers to push the product that we need for defense. That's why it was very important with steel tariffs. Now, manufacturing, people building huge skyscrapers, all this stuff, they want cheap steel. They want to get steel because then it costs them less and they make more profit. So they're going to go and they're going to import it because the Chinese make it with slave labor and they don't care about the profits. Sometimes they just undercut us because if they know they can shut down one of our steel mills by undercutting the price, that's a win for them. They didn't have to bomb it, just went out of business. And then later on, when all the steel mills are gone in the U.S. and they're not producing anymore, and it's very expensive to restart and rebuild those mills, what are the Chinese going to do with their steel? They're going to raise the price because they're going to have market cornered. So what you do is you make the Chinese steel more expensive than U.S. steel no matter what. U.S. steel should always be cheaper than Chinese steel. Or at least the Chinese steel should be the same price, but it costs more to ship it over here. So then then like with when President Trump had all the respirators made, right? Forced them to make respirators. Right? Then you got to go in and you got to force a company to say, no, you're going to produce more steel because it's necessary. Maybe you could have the U.S. government. I'd make myself laugh. That's making myself laugh. You could have the U.S. government open up its own steel mill. Now, that's funny, huh, Paul?
Yeah. Like the post office and all kinds of other things. Yeah.
California high-speed rail.
Right.
We'll let the government take care of this. Okay. But here's a story, and true story, right? So you had Fort Sheridan, which was on the BRAC list, with the base realignment and closing, the BRAC list, because they felt that the military had declined after Vietnam. We had a peace dividend in the 90s. The Soviet Union had fallen apart. We didn't need a big standing army to go up against the big red threat back then. And so they started closing a lot of bases. And one of the bases they decided to close down as a full-time base was Fort Sheridan. But they had already, they knew they were going to close it down, but they had a 5-year plan to build a new PX and a new commissary. Brand new, big, a PX is post-exchange. It's kind of like a Kmart or not so much a Walmart, but a Kmart, a Kohl's, kind of like a Kohl's, all right? For the troops to get, household stuff and equipment they need. And then you had a commissary, which is a subsidized grocery store because the lower level GIs really don't get paid that much. So you make sure that groceries are a little cheaper and everything. And they had a commissary on Fort Sheridan and they had a PX on Fort Sheridan, but they were in old buildings that weren't designed to do that. They were old warehouses. So they said, we're going to build new ones. And they had this 5-year plan. But they knew before they built them, they knew that Fort Sheridan was going to close. So they built these new buildings, multi-million-dollar buildings, and they're only open for 2 years before the base closes. And now the buildings weren't designed to be military buildings, but they end up having to be reutilized by reserve units that were left at Fort Sheridan. And they had to move into these buildings which weren't designed to help them. Then, like my unit was in a old barracks because Fort Sheridan used to be the home of Recruiting Command, and that's where they taught the school. So you get recruiters come there, and they would stay there while they were learning to be recruiters and everything. And so Recruiting Command shut down. I don't know where they went. They're somewhere else. They're not at Fort Sheridan. And they moved a reserve unit into that building because the World War II buildings were finally falling apart, right? So they moved, and again, the building's not designed to hold a military unit. It's not designed for administrative. So we had a problem with the water fountain in there. This is true story, all right? And we're constantly asking for that water fountain to be fixed, replaced. I mean, it's right as you walk in the door, it's a water fountain, but it was always broke, clogged, whatever. They never came in to fix it. Now, when they finally decided to tear this building down, and it'd been on the list to be torn down for years while they were backlogged building the other building, which had to be condemned after they built it. But here comes the Army Corps of Engineers the day before they tear down this building. The day
They
before
fixed it.
they put in a brand new water fountain, brand new. The day before they took the building has been unoccupied for months. And I'm like, they could have done that any time. So get the government to run something like that, right? I would have fixed it myself, but you're not a contractor. Hey, give me some op funds, buy a water fountain. I'll tear this thing off the wall and put a new one in. Well, you're not with the Corps of Engineers. I says, no, but I could turn a wrench. Yes, I'm sure the plumbers out there, you're good at what you do. You're very good at what you do. When I have something really complicated, I call a plumber in, a good plumber. But can I do basic stuff? All right. So, the government needs to change a way a lot of things work, right? Especially the tariffs. I'm glad the tariffs are out there, and it needs to be focused on our national defense to defend the country. We just can't tariff anything, right? In my opinion, well, we should tariff everything. What am I saying? Tariffs are better than income tax. And you'll have people.
I'll second that.
You'll have people say, oh, no, tariffs are just a tax on the poor. Well, okay, so is the lottery. The lottery's the ultimate tax on the poor. That is. But, and have you paid your poor tax this week for the Powerball?
No.
700 million. What would you do with it?
A lot.
Like I said, the old joke, right? What would you do with 700 million? I would spend half of it on wine, women, and song, and then I would spend the other half foolishly. Matt gets it.
Yes.
All right, so
there was a guy who stole a lot of money one time, and it was a case we did in Cook County, and Jay Leno actually did a joke on it, and the joke was, the guy stole like $5 million. I'm making the number up, and he spent the money on hookers and gambling and trips, and then he spent the other half on some dumb stuff. So it could happen.
Yeah. All right, so when you're talking about electronics, television sets, one of the main things is microchips, microprocessors, right? The United States, beyond a doubt, because of all of our universities and all of our smart people, and the number one thing, the consumer's pushing it. You don't hear about this. This technology was developed at the University of Tokyo. You don't hear this technology was developed at the University of South Korea. You hear this technology was developed at MIT, all right, Stanford, Illinois Institute of Technology, one of the big tech schools.
Pepperdine, something like that.
In the United States. And then the foreign students here, everyone that comes to learn something comes here, right? Especially technical stuff. You don't see a lot of foreign students coming over here for art or for...
Yeah, art appreciation or violin classical training.
Yeah, well, maybe the Berkeley School of Music, maybe you have a few in there for classical music training. It's supposed to be one of the best music schools in the world. And again, that's in the United States, right? But then they go back to their home country and they have all the technology in their head, and suddenly Sony is building Walkman and making a fortune off of it. So where was the Apple iPhone developed?
In Silicon Valley?
Yeah, in the United States. Korea didn't do it. Japan didn't do it. Where are they being made, though?
Over there.
Over there. I bought a phone. Um, I can't even remember the name anymore. Ugh. Well, I don't. I got a phone, and it took them like a long time to send it to me. But every component in that phone is built in the United States. Every single component of the phone, and it was slightly more expensive than an iPhone. But with an iPhone, you get subsidized, fake subsidized by your phone company that says, "Oh, we're only going to charge you $50 a month for 24 months, which is $200 more than you would have paid if you paid cash for the thing." But every component was made in the United States. So if there is a supply chain issue, these are all made in the United States. So I get the supplies. I got in trouble at a military class I was going to for a computer. Now, this is off-the-shelf computer, but it was used for classified things, right? And it was a Japanese-made computer for the U.S. Army. And I says, hold on a second. Why are you buying a Japanese computer when we have we still have computer makers Gateway in the United States? Why are you buying this Panasonic, which is Japanese? And they didn't have an answer for that. I says, if you have a supply chain issue, all of a sudden, all the things that are made to work with this computer, it's this specific laptop here, we can't use. You can't guarantee that the Japanese, if we go to war with anyone, that the Japanese will back us. It might not be in their best interest. And if it's not in their best interest, then they'll stop shipping us the parts. Are we going to go to war with them over it? They went to war with us over us not, selling stuff to them. Scrap steel and oil. We said that we're not going to sell it to you anymore because we don't like what you're doing in China. So, should there be tariffs on all those electronic things? At least the
on American ones.
Yeah, that's another thing that because it's so sensitive that they're talking about artificial intelligence, robots, electronic warfare, GPS systems, everything, communication systems, everything is now based on microprocessors, not just solid state. You got to have like 4 or 5 little computer microprocessors in these things, all working something else, right? It's so sensitive that we put a limit on them. You can't sell these things that we make here overseas. What is it? That's why like the Sony PlayStation, some of those, again, what is that driven? Who's driving it? The Department of Defense or consumers?
Consumers.
Consumers drove the increase in graphic processing possibility, the increase of the processors, how fast they worked and everything, how they're packed in, miniaturized and everything. And they got these virtual reality games where everything looks real, artificial intelligence, you can't really tell whether it's a live person or it's a computer generated person now because they're up to 8K. We used to have like a television, your average television, right, had 400 lines of resolution. Right? They call it like 320p now, right? That's your average television when we grew up, right? And then you had beta television. Then you have the monitors. And now it's like 8,000 lines of resolution, and your eye can only spot so much difference, So you can't tell what's live or not. If the computer could do that, the other things they're capable of doing. So I think some guy got arrested because he was selling a bunch of these to the Chinese, a bunch of like Sony's PlayStations. And they're like, you can't do that because the processor's on them. It wasn't 1 or 2. It was like thousands of them. And the Chinese aren't going to they're not going to give that out to little kids to play. They're going to take those processors and use them for other applications, most likely military. The other thing that flipped my wig, all right? No, I got off on a tangent, all right? So I got in trouble for bringing that up, because the people that were teaching the class were guys that had spent their basic 3 years in the Army, came out with a clearance, didn't have any life experience or anything, but got a job as a contractor to teach these classes to the Army, and they're only teaching over a written script that they have. But they're supposed to be the instructors, but they didn't have answers. That was a problem I had a lot with the Army. Right? Now, the military, when they're building, when we tell them we want this communication equipment, this high-speed, sensitive communication equipment that's encrypted and has got frequency hop and it's got all the fancy stuff, can't be hacked, they can't intercept our stuff, and we order this stuff, and the guy making it, because the Army put out, this is what we want. These are the capabilities that we want. And then there's a bidding process, and some company gives us all the capabilities we want, and then they go and buy Chinese components. And no one ever checks to see if there's back doors in these components that are put together. Like Wi-Fi, if you want something with Wi-Fi, or you want something with infrared, or some of that technology, whether the Chinese haven't put a back door in there that if we went to war with China, they can access that through the back door that they have and disable all of our equipment.
Well, Mike, they wouldn't do that, because we see secular humanism and say no one would do that. Why would you even think that they would do that? You know what I'm saying?
But here's the funny thing, right? Here's this is what makes me laugh, right? When we come back, I'll give you more of it. But the fact that this makes it past the planning stage, that no one is there raising their hand and saying, "Hey, this is a problem." No one takes the first thing that's delivered, looks at it, takes it apart, and says, "No, you replace that component there, replace that one there," because it becomes yeah. We got kind of off topic, but I like the topic we're on because I got a lot to say about it.
Good.
And a shout out to my cousin Janine. I'm glad she likes my books, but she's had eyesight issues, so I really should. I really need to sit down and do my audiobooks. And I could get the audiobooks. I think I could sell a lot more. But at least she listens to the radio show now and then. And then she tells my mother, and my mother respects her because that's her older cousin. So my mother can't make fun of my radio show now. All right, we'll be back for the last quarter of the show.
Political party poopers got you down? Shake it off and join me, Dennis Sonar Green, every weekday from 4 to 6 p.m. on WRMN for A Political Talk Show, where we cut through the doom and gloom with a focus on America first, constitutional values, and a populist perspective that puts you, the citizen, at the center of the conversation. At WRMN, the talk of the town, we're not afraid to challenge the status quo and bring you the straight talk you need. Whether you're frustrated with the political establishment or looking for a clear, some nonsense analysis, this show has you covered. Tune in. Let's take on the issues together with a fresh, unfiltered approach. Catch us every weekday from 4 to 6 p.m. on WRMN, a political talk show. WRMN, the talk of the town.
Get ready for Around the House every Saturday night from 5 to 7 p.m. on WRMN AM 1410. If you're a homeowner or contractor looking to tackle those projects that feel a bit too big, this is the show for you. Join Eric along with his knowledgeable guests as they dive deep into everything from DIY renovations to creating a healthy home environment. We'll provide you with the tools and tips you need to complete your projects with confidence and ease. But it's not all work and no play. We believe in having fun. Our passion for home improvement shines through as we help you save time, money, and reduce the stress of DIY. So whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, don't miss Around the House. Tune in every Saturday night and let's tackle those home projects together.
We asked parents who adopted teens to share their journey.
If you build a relationship, then it becomes easier. If you build trust, it becomes easier. As a parent, you want what's best for your child. To give them the love that a child needs. It's probably the best thing you can do for a teenager.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. Visit adoptuskids.org to learn more. A message brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
This is the story of the one. As a lineman, he does whatever it takes to keep the power on in his community. And he wants a partner like Grainger who does the same. Grainger offers the professional-grade products he needs, from voltage detectors to harnesses to hard hats, plus fast, dependable delivery, so he can rise to every challenge. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Here on WRMN AM 1410, we like to keep you informed and in tune to what's happening here in the Fox River Valley and what's going on here on WRMN. We recognize the importance of local radio to be a part of the conversation and to be a part of the community for the community.
You know, we talked about the importance of community theater, but supporting community radio is a big deal too. And, you know, for WRMN, this is a really cool thing that you guys do every day, and a really important thing. You have to have a local media outlet to talk about what's going on in your